Good evening and welcome, everyone, to the Know to Prevent monthly virtual speaker series. Know to Prevent, if you're with us for the first time, is a collaboration of youth-focused coalitions and agencies in Westchester working together to provide essential tools to parents and caregivers to help increase resiliency and to reduce risky behaviors among our youth. For more information about Know to Prevent, please visit our website listed down at the bottom of this slide. There is a lot of information there about who participates, as well as upcoming presentations and recordings of previous presentations. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. All participants will receive a link to the recording tomorrow, along with a handout called the tip jar. The tip jar will highlight key takeaways, information, and prompts from tonight's speaker, Matt Bellace, for you to have and keep and refer to going forward. So there will be a Q&A live at the end of the presentation, and we encourage you all to type in any questions that you may have during the presentation into the Q&A box. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Linda Focina, who is representing the Way Coalition in Hastings and one of our lead coalition sponsors. Linda?
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening. My name is Linda Focina, and I'm the Coalition Coordinator for the Hastings Working Alliance for Youth, the Way. We are a group of parents, educators, and community members that work to reduce youth substance use, alcohol, and other harmful substances in the village of Hastings-on-Hudson. We're so pleased to be one of the organizing sponsors of this virtual speaker series. And now let me introduce our key speaker tonight, Dr. Matt Bellace. Since 1995, Dr. Matt Bellace has been a professional speaker and stand-up comedian. His programs encourage over 100,000 youth and adults per year to pursue natural highs and dealing with disappointment in a healthy way. Dr. Bellace has a PhD in clinical neuropsychology, which is the study of the brain and behavior. He worked at the National Institutes of Mental Health and completed his internship at the Traumatic Brain and Spinal Cord Units at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City. He has also trained in cognitive behavioral therapy at Drexel University's Counseling Center. He's the author of the book, A Better High, a contributing author for the National Geographic Kids series, This or That, and was a recurring comedian on True TV's World's Dumbest. He was also featured in the documentary Voices of Hope about recovery from substance abuse. Matt's presentation tonight will focus on mental health, natural highs, and coping with disappointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I think there were a few mistakes I made in the bio I wrote for you. Maybe I don't have a PhD in English. I think that's pretty clear based on that. I got to check that over again. But thank you.
No problem.
Yes, thank you for doing that. And thank you for bringing me in for this. I do have a request. It's a lot more fun if we have more panelists. You'll see why. I'll have questions for the panelists later on. So if anybody just needs a bit of attention and is interested in being on camera, I'd love to have you. And all you have to do is raise your hand and we can promote you. We'll promote maybe one or two people, maybe more, who knows? We'll get crazy. I mean, it's Tuesday night, right? We're just gonna relax and let the hair down and have some fun. I'm so happy to be here. I get that I have an odd sort of background. I'm a psychologist who's a comedian. It's confusing. One time I got a phone call from a TV producer who said, "We need a psychologist who's funny and you appear to be the only one." I was like, thanks, I think. That makes me feel good. But I get the privilege of traveling around the country. I used to travel around the country and do presentations in front of large groups. I was in Missouri last week in front of a large group with no masks. And boy, was that an eye-opener. That felt like 2019 all over again. It was shocking and a little stressful, but tonight's program, glad to be home and doing this. And so we have Allison in my lower right there, Linda, who may or may not stay on, and Lisa, who probably will bow out quickly. I don't know if she said, I'm closing my camera down quickly. Do you have any takers, by the way, Lisa? Anybody who's raising hands to join us? No? All right, well, maybe they will later on. So let's start. Oh, I see some hands raised. There we go. Yeah. You know what? Any kid who's like the youngest in their family, like I was, they want that attention. They want that, yeah, I want to be part of this. I want to say a few things. So we're happy to have you. Let me start the presentation by showing some slides, get us in the mood. We'll go back and forth between slides and no slides, and we'll see who's on the call with us. But this is what life used to look like 14 months ago. Packed auditorium, except for Southeastern Missouri today. But I would show up to a school or a parent event, and of course, every seat taken. People love it. Tell a joke. They're laughing. They can't get enough, right? But I would always start with a chair demonstration, especially with students. I bring up 8 students, have them sit down and lean back in the lap of the person behind them. It's a lot of fun. You never know how they're going to react. One time a kid was like, "We're all going to die." I'm like, "You're 6 inches off the ground." I don't do it with adults because you bring them up and they're like, "My neck, my back." It's kind of sad. But I like to show it, at least to introduce the topic of positive support and leaning on people for support. And that's really my story. It's how I got through the last 14 months of this pandemic situation. I'll pause the screen sharing for now and tell you that as a guy who made a living doing presentations live, all of a sudden they were just gone, right? And it was so scary and stressful. Forget about the PhD on the wall. It didn't matter. I was like instantly overwhelmed with anxiety. Every morning I was waking up at like 4 a.m. with this chest pain. I'm like, is this coronavirus or a panic attack? I'm not really sure. I was thrust into mediocre homeschool dad, just sitting here like, oh, what's going to happen every day, just sweating it out. And I got to tell you, like, I tried all the things I'll talk about tonight. I tried as ways to reduce stress, and some of them worked certainly better than others. But I can tell you that at one night, I just needed a break. And I said to my wife, I'm just going to walk around the block. And 15 minutes later, and the reason I was doing it is because my daughter, who's 8 years old, was stressing me out. And so I walk around the block, I come back, and my daughter's now bawling on the floor. I'm like, what happened? I thought I was going to chill everybody out. And my wife said, I don't know, you left, and she thought you were leaving forever. And then she screamed, I hardly even knew him. Like, Thank you, Allison. Our one person laughing. If Allison didn't laugh, you know how much uncomfortable that would be for all of us. I'm like, wow, that really. Allison's like, yeah, that wasn't. There we go. Lynn is back on. She's like, I'm bailing you out, man. I'll smile. I'll help you out. So, just trying to express that. You know what? All of us have been through a time where forget about how educated you are. Forget about how smart you think you are. Like layered crises, one after another. I got COVID, by the way, in December. After masking and being so safe, and then I get it. And it was like such a shock because I spent 5 days around my kids and my wife, and they didn't get it. I'm like, I'm a little disappointed in COVID. What do you mean you didn't get it? I was around you for 5 days. None of them got. My daughter's like flexing outside my office, so I'm isolated. Like, yeah, we didn't get it. Oh man, but that was scary in its own way, because it wasn't easy. I had trouble breathing, but I'm fortunate. I didn't have to go to the hospital. I'm still here. But the key is, and the reason why I bring all this up is because what I noticed got me through it: social support, friends, family, clients got me back in the game. And I saw it firsthand, the powerful effect of people reaching out, saying, I know this must be tough for you. We feel for you. How are you doing? That was amazing. And it changed everything for me. And I want to show you a quick video of a friend of mine who taught me the chair demonstration many years ago. His name is Rob Torres. Rob used to do the chair thing as a warm-up act for Disney. And then he left Disney to travel the world as a lead clown for Big Apple Circus. And this was one of his signature bits. Rob passed away in 2018. I thought to myself, oh, man, I just want to talk about my friend and my programs, but I want to do it in a relevant way. And this clip is perfect for this moment because he does a neat trick with a box, and it helps us launch into more of a conversation about support. So here we go. My buddy Rob Torres used to walk out in front of audiences of thousands in countries he didn't speak the language and capture their applause in a box. And when I look at that clip, I think to myself, man, who do I have in my life that's like the box? Who applauds me even on my worst day? And I can think of several, thankfully. But of the panelists, two of which who just joined us, Kathy and Lily, and anyone else, Allison, Linda, want to share who's been like the box for you over the last 14 months? Who's been applauding you even on your worst day?
I'll go. My mom is always, whether it's warranted or not, my biggest cheerleader. So I'm always very thankful for that. The difference during COVID was it had to be from afar, but still just as effective. It really did make me realize how important those connections are and how much I get out of the support that she gives. So
I'm curious if there's anything specific that your mom does that you find effective. A good listener, making eye contact over Zoom, which is hard to do.
honestly, I think the biggest thing is she notices even small things that, I think that other people don't notice that, I go out of my way to try and do.
Mhm.
So that is, I think, one of the most significant things I notice.
Someone picks up on the small things. I like it. Anyone else? Kathy? Lily, who's doing a dance, I think. I'm not really sure what. Robert, we have a new person to join us. Anybody want to share who's been like the box for you over the last 14 months?
Well, I'll comment from some of the audience that are putting answers in the chat. And Kristen has said her dog gives her lots of applause in the form of kisses. And Helena said my dad, sister, niece, and nephew are all overseas, but those are her support.
Awesome. Thank you.
So Matt, I'm gonna chime in and echo your sentiments. So hi, I'm Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
I too had COVID in January, and so did my husband and my daughter and a few other family members. And we all got ourselves through it by family and friends, the encouragement, one day at a time. And, just people checking in and making sure that everybody was okay. And whether it was a drop off of a meal or just a simple text of how you're doing. So
Makes a big difference, right?
absolutely.
I'll tell you, my wife got both. My wife is also a psychologist. Two psychologists married. I mean, that's an interesting marriage, by the way. So like, Matt, what you said, how that makes me feel? Yes, I do. That's all the time we have for tonight. But she got both of us on a list to get the vaccine early, talking like mid to late January. And I had just had COVID. And I said to my doctor, should I get this? He's like, it's hard to get one. You might as well. With the first 24 hours, I'm underneath the blanket. I'm miserable, fever. It's horrible, right? I turn on the TV and they said, well, if you had COVID, you probably should wait 6 months before you get the shot. I'm like, come on, really? And then I said to my wife, I'm not getting a second shot. There's no way. No way. She's like, yes, you are. We signed you up. You're getting the shot. Get the second shot 3 weeks later. I'm sick as a dog, underneath the blanket, turn on the TV. Anthony Fauci's like, look, if you had COVID and you got the first shot, don't get the second shot. I'm like, ah! I couldn't do anything right. I don't know about you, Kathy, but did you get the shots? Were you sick as a dog?
Nope, I got my 2 Pfizers.
You did. And were you horribly sick or are you okay?
36 hours, a little aches, bringing back the memories of COVID ache, but we were fine after the 36 hours.
Maybe I'm a baby. It was a horrible ache, a lot of complaining. But you know what? Social support has been the key, it sounds like, for all of us. And I'm so happy to hear that it's doing its thing. If you look at some of the research behind this, it always fascinates me. As you go from low to medium to high levels of support, symptoms of depression, anxiety, even thoughts of self-injury and suicide go down, and they go down significantly. And so surrounding ourselves with lots of people who are there for us is crucial. And the toughest part, I think, is people who don't have lots of strong social support, and they relied before COVID on the incidental social contact, in the hallways of the office building or in the neighborhood. And now all of a sudden that was taken away. And so it really reveals itself and can be truly difficult. The people who struggle the most during lockdown are people who had a history of mental illness. And you would expect that older people would have a much tougher time emotionally. Nope, it's been the opposite. Younger people have far fewer positive emotions, far more negative emotions, and we could sort of theorize why that is. Younger people have had more to lose, right? They've lost, school, sports teams if they're young adults and they have kids and jobs, and now they're worried about their home and their families. Older people might have a stronger social network in place, some money in the bank, and they've seen this before. They've seen difficult times before, and they know that this too shall pass, and that can be really helpful to get through it. So much of my work, it basically is in this graphic here, the Yerkes-Dodson law of how anxiety affects performance. And we know if we have too much anxiety in our life, it's going to impair our performance. You're going to want to shut down. For me, in the early weeks of COVID, I didn't even think I could do virtual programs. Okay, I was annoyed at someone even suggesting it. My anxiety was that strong. It bothered me to even think about doing anything else besides try to manage the anxiety. If we don't have enough, by the way, we lose interest in an activity. So we're going for that middle, right down the middle, optimal level of arousal, which enhances our performance. And for 5 years, I worked for the Navy SEAL Foundation and did post-deployment conferences for Navy SEALs and their families. And they taught me basically how they do their incredibly dangerous jobs without being so wrought with anxiety that they can't even focus. And it comes down to the SEAL teams. They've got people on their team who have their back, and they can get through it. By the way, it's fascinating to do presentations for Navy SEALs. The first one I spoke to was SEAL Team 6 months after they got Osama bin Laden. And the commanding officer, right, I'm about to go on stage, he's like, "You got to be funny, Matt. Please be funny." I'm like, "Yes, sir." Right? I was just running out there, like all fired up. Man, the pressure was on, but it went well enough. And I got to speak to every SEAL team over 5 years. My focus primarily is the adolescent brain. I am fascinated by it. You have the tale of two brains, right? You've got the emotional center of the brain represented here by Captain Kirk. It's oversized because in a teenager, it's much more active than it is in an adult. And it's trying to be balanced by sort of an underactive frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex represented by Dr. Spock. So as parents of children, especially teens, you're playing this role where you have to be their frontal lobe sometimes. Now my kids are 8 and 11, so I'm not quite there yet. Sometimes the other parents of like teenagers will see me in my neighborhood. I'm like, "Oh, that's for my daughter. She's cute. She's 8." And they're like, "I miss those days." Really? This gets worse? You miss this? They're like, "It totally gets worse. You'll see." Oh, and I can kind of relate because it's like, being their frontal lobe all the time. And mostly with 8 and 11-year-olds, it's about cleaning up your room and picking up things. But teenagers, it becomes a whole different ballgame of decision-making and risk-taking. I love this quote by Stephen Stosny, the psychologist, who said, "Anger is a failure of compassion." And it's important to remember this because it's very easy to get angry at human beings that have underperforming frontal lobes, right? You can feel yourself getting so annoyed. You're looking at a teenager, they look like they might be adults. Why can't they figure this out? What were you thinking? But if we can have compassion for their developing brain, we can sort of interfere with that circuit that has us getting so upset over a poor decision they make. Ultimately, having compassion for ourselves is the key. And that was so helpful for me during the 14 months so far of the pandemic. At some point, I just had to put my hands up and say, "Look, I can't, do it all. I need some help." And my wife's private practice, she's an eating disorder psychologist. Her practice exploded. Like overnight, it doubled. I'm like, "Where was this 10 years ago? I could have been traveling a lot less." Are you serious? Well, people helped. She helped. We get through it. We have to have compassion when we're working with our kids, and it's very difficult. If you're putting in the work, it's difficult, right? If you're not around, it seems easy. Oh, it's going great. When you're there all the time, it is hard. And most of us have been there day in, day out with our kids, and it's tough. Teenagers are natural born risk takers. I met a 16-year-old once who told me this story. So they were hiking, and his buddies decided to climb up a cliff and jump off into the water. And they get to the edge of the cliff and they stop. And he's actually telling the story. I'm like, what'd you do? He's like, well, we talked about it and we decided, look, if someone gets hurt, we're like hours from town. We could totally die. I'm like, oh, that's great. What'd you do next? Well, we jumped. Oh, what? You jumped? What? You considered the consequences, but you did it anyway? Yeah. You know, that is the teenage mentality. They have this amazing sort of brain work where it's like they're more emotional, maybe more anxious, but the peer influence can override that. And so if we look at a study at a Temple University in Lawrence Steinberg's lab, he took a look at adolescents, young adults, and adults, put them in a simulated driving machine, and wanted to know what risks will they take. Well, it turns out when adolescents are alone in the machine, their risk-taking looks similar to someone in their mid-20s. But as soon as their friends are present, even if their friends are, they're told that their friends are watching them through like closed circuit TV, their risk-taking goes through the roof. Look at the difference. I showed this to a 12th grader once. He's like, man, adults are lame, huh? I was like, you have no idea. My biggest risk is, am I going to eat bread tonight? I think I will. But teenagers have a totally different way of looking at it because their brains are different. Look, we can follow blood flow in regions of the frontal lobe associated with risk-taking, orbital frontal cortex, ventral striatum. We can see differences only for adolescents, only when their friends are present. So their brains are different when their friends are there. I am done hearing from parents who say like, yeah, you know, I figure I'll host the party and everything will be fine. Like, because I know my kid and his friends. Well, as soon as they come over, they, you know, start taking risks, and who knows what's going on without you looking. It could be really problematic and dangerous. It's tough. So I'll say this, my most difficult time growing up was middle school. This was me, and here's the story behind it. So 8th grade, dealing with multiple different stressors. My grandfather had cancer. He was not doing well. My brother was just 5 years older than me, got in a lot of trouble with his friends, like partying, parents yelling and screaming all the time about it. And me, I had these eyebrows, these thick Sicilian eyebrows. And one day, sure enough, early in 8th grade, someone made fun of them. And I went home that night and I was like, I'm going to shave them a little bit. That's a mistake. Don't shave your own eyebrows, right? Lindsay likes that. And I went home and I did this to myself. And the day I walk in looking like this was picture day, which is the worst part of the whole story. Like I walk in, I forgot. And the photographer's like, you want packet A or packet B? I was like, I never want to see this again. He's like, sorry, it'll be in the yearbook. Click. For the rest of my life. But I'm happy that I have it because it reminds me when the haters come out, and they will, don't mutilate your eyebrows. No, instead pursue your passions. Now, this may shock you, but this is me. I played football, which is probably hard for you to believe since I'm built more like a reader. In high school, I got 8 varsity letters. Captain of the wrestling team, captain of the baseball team. I still scratch my head like, how did this all happen? I wasn't some great athlete. And I realized when my grandfather passed, he was the mayor of Point Pleasant Beach. Everyone loved him, and I wanted just to make him proud. And he loved sports, all kinds of sports, especially baseball, especially golf. And I thought, man, if I could become a great athlete, he'll be proud of me. But it turns out I'm not the only one who ever done that. Just read the biography of your favorite athlete, actor, comedian, musician, world leader. It's the same story, right? They go through pain, loss, and failure, but they find a way to take that energy and they use it as fuel to do something brilliant. Ultimately, you know, you look at an adolescent's friends, sons, daughters, friends, what risks are they encouraging, right? And when there's disappointment, ultimately, are they using it to push themselves forward, or is it something that's self-destructive? I know I look more like Mr. Rogers now than some great athlete. It pains me that you're laughing so hard at that, Lindsay. But it's true. I mean, like, I will tell you this. What I love about sports or any kind of performing is you get to deal with disappointment all the time. You think about athletics, right? You're constantly failing. And I learned this lesson in high school. My junior year, I was on a football team ranked 6th in the nation. Look at that. Only 5 teams considered better than us in the country. And we played in a game that our state's newspaper called the greatest high school game ever played. The website Max Preps lists as number 3 all-time greatest game ever. Here's why it was the greatest. We're the number 1 team playing the number 2 team, Randolph. They are also undefeated. If Randolph beats us, they'll break the state record for wins. Oh, and their coach died like in the middle of the season. Talk about drama. The game was so close. We were told that the new coach brought the team to the old coach's gravesite before the game. And when they showed up, there were 13,000 fans there. Just an unbelievable scene. You can make a movie out of this. Close game the whole way. Fourth quarter, we're up by 2. Randolph is marching down the field. They're about to score about a minute to go when they fumbled. And we recovered, and the fans go wild. We're going to win the state championship. All you have to do is take a knee a few times. After the third down of taking a knee, scoreboard clock went to 0. Fans rushed the field. I got kissed by a girl I didn't even know. Good day. We're getting fitted for rings. Like, this is amazing. Refs start blowing their whistle, though, telling everybody, get back. Get back. There's time on the clock. Our coach is like, what do you mean? There's no time. It's out of time. 7 seconds. We got to run another play. We punted. Didn't go very far. Randolph took the ball and kicked a 37-yard field goal to beat us with no time left on the clock. We totally got robbed. By the way, I spoke at Randolph High School and said that line, and they laughed at me in unison. They're like, come on, of course we were going to win that game. But when you look at this iconic photo from that day, I want you to notice the young man lying on the ground. His name is Deron Thornton. Deron narrowly missed blocking that field goal to preserve the victory. And you may think to yourself, oh, his life is over. Look at that. Deron went on to become an assistant coach at my high school and won 5 state championships with the team. Those 2 events are definitely related. And I asked him this question. He totally agreed. We went through tremendous pain losing this game, but it was the kind of pain that you wake up the next day and you say, well, I'm still here. All right, I'm still on this planet. I'm okay. And that's powerful. And if you can take that disappointment and pain and put it towards something productive, you can impress so many people, especially yourself, with how far you get. And that's what Deron did after that game. You know, in November, on top of dealing with everything else with the pandemic, my dad, a healthy guy, slips and falls in his garage and has a head injury. Imagine that. Someone who studied traumatic brain injury. My father has a TBI. I had to fly down to South Carolina to be with my mom. They wouldn't even let me in the hospital. My dad never woke up. And I'm telling you this story because in the weeks and months after he passed, what I noticed was a tremendous desire to write. I'd been writing a book on what topic? Disappointment. Shocker there, right? And I was having a hard time finding the moments to write. After my dad passes, it's like I couldn't find enough time. You give me 5 hours, I want 2 more. It felt so good. It was therapeutic just to write. And that's what I'm talking about. And I would love for the parents on this call to encourage your son or daughter to reframe the disappointments of their life. Are they going to get in trouble sometimes and it wasn't fair? Sure. Will they not do as well on a test as they thought? Yes. Will they get rejected from the college they thought was going to be this answer to their success? Yeah, perhaps. But if we embrace these things and say, look, this is just energy produced when you go through these disappointments, rather than try to spend your whole life trying to fix everything for the kid, but focus on how to take these emotions and do something productive with them. I think we're going to have our kids, being more resilient in the end. I speak all over, and I was up in, I'm not bragging here, but I was in northern Manitoba one day, a place called Swan River. And I will tell you, it was negative 20 degrees. It took me so long to get there. By the time I arrived, I was angry at them for living there. I'm like, are you serious? There's roads. You can go leave whenever you want. Why are you people here? I did my presentation. I go back to my hotel and I see this. Children playing outside at recess, negative 20 degrees. Allison, you work at a school in Westchester, right? Tell us, what temperature will they not allow children to go outside at recess?
I don't know, but definitely nowhere near that. I'll tell you that.
32, 36?
I think, right? So we're in there. Yeah. We're, I guess we're soft in this area, huh?
Well, no, I don't know about that, but it's 50 degrees colder up there and they figured it out, right? So if you had to do it, Allison, you could live up there too, all right? You probably wouldn't want to, but you would. And it's because human beings, our DNA is about survival. It's why we're all over the planet. And we just forget to tell our kids sometimes that that's built into your genes. We can overcome, hard times, and we're doing it through the pandemic too. We figured it out. It's not been pleasant. We've lost so many people, but we will live on, and we're stronger than we think. And I think that's the one message we forget to remind our adolescents. They are stronger than they think. It was built into their DNA to get through the difficult moments. And I'll tell you, I love to surf, and surfing taught me the most beautiful waves. They come from the biggest storms. The storms of life are going to hit you, and sometimes they hit you hard. But if you can just wait a little bit, just like when the hurricanes blow up the East Coast, if you can just wait a day or two, the waves will be epic. But it's all about knowing some of the coping skills, of course, to deal with the disappointment and then to gather that energy and move forward with it. So one of the coping skills I'd like to share with you, I learned at a camp when I was in high school. First, I'll stop sharing my screen and tell you that. So my brother, he's 5 years older than me. I'm about to go into high school. He's in college, getting into trouble. I can remember my parents yelling and screaming all the time, saying, all kinds of things about his behavior. And so when I hit ninth grade, my mom was worried I'd be just like him. And she says, Matt, we're going to send you away to a leadership conference that teaches teens how to be drug-free. I'm like, no, you're not. Send him, not me. I had to go because my mom was the vice principal at my high school. I had to go. Anybody on the call of a parent work in your school ever growing up? Anybody? Nobody? Yeah. One time I was at a conference and a kid raised his hand and said, both. I'm like, both your parents work at your high school? He goes, I'm homeschooled. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Well, my mom makes me go to this camp. And one of the things I learned at camp was a technique I want to share with you right now. I need you to do me a favor though, and sit up nice and straight in your seats. Put your hands in your lap and close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes, but it definitely makes it better. During this brief exercise, I'd like you to try and think about nothing. It's hard to do this. The brain is constantly active, even when you're asleep, dreaming. I'm going to give you a word to help you here. If you're distracted by some thoughts or some noises, say this word to yourself, not out loud. It's a nonsense word. It doesn't mean anything, but it could be your word going forward. You can use this in the future. The word is "seeum." Seeum. Again, it doesn't mean anything, and only use it if you have to. But the goal here is to just try to close your eyes and think about nothing. We're going to start with a chime and end with my voice. Okay, ready? Okay, open your eyes for me, please. Thank you for doing that. Now I'm going to ask you to do me a favor and stand up while I ask you some more questions about this. So if you can adjust your camera, able to do this. Stand if you would. Notice the difference, how you feel standing versus sitting. Let me ask the panelists, was that hard? Was it easy? Who had a tough time with that? Thoughts kept racing, couldn't shut off the mind. Anyone have a tough time? Nobody?
A little bit. I'm definitely not used to it. I don't practice meditation normally, so I kept wondering whether anyone was writing something in the chat that I should be looking at.
Did you try the word, Linda? Was that helpful?
Yeah, I tried.
Okay.
It goes for a little while. I listened to some birds chirping outside.
Were you thinking, this guy gets paid to do this? Are you serious? Just sitting in silence? How about, I see some people in the chat saying very hard time, very distracted, use the word several times. Kathy, you raised your hand. You said it was tough for you too?
Yeah, it was tough. I was listening to my kids in the background, making dinner, the outside noises. It's
Sure.
hard.
So anyone have an easy time where your mind just quickly went calm, didn't think about much, feeling peaceful? Anybody?
I felt it was peaceful.
Thank you, Robert. Have you meditated before, Robert?
Occasionally, very infrequently.
Very frequently. So often what I find is when I ask that question, the people who say, yes, it worked for me, tend to be the ones who've done it before, maybe who do it nearly every day. And that's the point, is that it's all about practice. Nobody's born being good at this. When I started doing it, I thought it was like torture. I'm like, I'm wide awake. I'm going to sit down with my eyes closed. Why would I do that? And the thoughts just were racing, and it was so difficult. And I had many excuses for why it wouldn't work. And then I watched a video that ultimately convinced me, and it said, look, the busy among us need this. It was a neuroscientist who was just talking about the benefits. And I said, once you tap into it, and it takes about 2 weeks for your brain to sort of get it, like, oh, this is about resting. You go to this calm, quiet place. Now, when I work with teenagers, I present this same exercise, but I often tell them that, look, guided meditations will probably be more effective for you, because teens like to have someone talk them through it. Headspace is a great app for that. YouTube has tons of free guided body scan meditations. But I will say this, that what I noticed within 2 weeks of starting, I would fall asleep so quickly. And I was the kind of guy who would lie in bed trying to solve the world's problems at night. No longer. My wife got annoyed at me. Like, how could you fall asleep so fast? And it's incredible how I just become really good at calming my thoughts. Now, I can share with you that it saved my career, I think, to be honest. I used to fly all the time. I still fly, occasionally. I've seen some disgusting things on planes. I used to get upset at them, maybe raise my voice. Not since meditation. Like one time I was eating dinner on my tray and a woman starts trimming her toenails like arm's length from my food, which is disgusting. Like I didn't freak out though. I didn't scream. And I have like a little Tony Soprano lives right here in my chest. But at no point was I like, you want to taste your clippings? No, neither do I. Like I didn't yell, didn't scream, just put my food away, turn my back. And I was like, whoa, that was a calmer reaction than I normally would have had. By the way, you can have a seat for me, please. Thank you so much for standing. And I had you stand because meditation comes before action, precedes acting. Many people think, oh, it's something you do right before bedtime. No, falling asleep faster is just a secondary effect of meditating. When I started meditating, it was early in the morning and then in the afternoon. Now I just do it once a day for 20 minutes from 4 to 4:20. Yes, I get the irony of that. I don't need weed. I just sit and breathe. And colors are brighter. My mood is up. I make better decisions. I can tell you once on a plane, I got bumped up to first class, which you assume is going to be amazing. So I got up there, did my meditation. I opened my eyes and the stewardess is taking the dinner order. She's like, will you be joining us for dinner this evening? I'm like, no, I have reservations in the bathroom. I'm sorry. Yes, of course I'll join you. I'm going nowhere. She's like, we have the stuffed chicken or the shrimp. I'm like, I'll have the chicken, please. Then she goes to the guy next to me and says, I'm sorry, sir. It appears we only have the shrimp left. This guy must have been allergic to shellfish or something because he starts screaming at her like, where's my chicken? All the money I paid, I want the chicken. And she's flustered. She's like, hey, I gave it to someone else. He's like, I know, you gave it to him. And he starts pointing to me with his disgusting finger in my face. It was the worst flight I've ever been on, but the best chicken. That chicken was amazing. By the way, I didn't yell at this guy at all. I wrote a nice letter to United, got tons of points, because in life, if you can respond to stress rather than react to it in the moment, things tend to work out for you better, right? And it's healthier for us to be calmer, to the ability to catch ourselves, especially catch our breathing before it gets out of control, is tremendous. It's powerful. One time I was gardening with my son and he wanted to understand what meditation was, and I couldn't explain it to him why I do it. And like a few days later, we're gardening and I give him some plants to throw out the curb. And a minute later, he's screaming and running at me like you just saw Slender Man. He's like, ah! Like, what happened? He goes, oh, my eyes are burning. And I realized, oh no, I gave him jalapeno pepper plants to throw out. He must have cracked a jalapeno and rubbed it in his eyes. What do you do if you eat something that's too hot? What do you do? Any comments from the panelists? What do you do?
Drink milk.
That's right. You suffer. You suffer. Now, milk is right, Allison. So I picked up my son. I bring him to the kitchen, and I tip his head over the sink and pour milk all over his face. And he's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I'm like, it's going to be okay. And 30 seconds later, he starts blinking. Oh my God, I'm fine. What did you do? And I said to him, I became a scientist right away. I'm like, well, the capsaicin and the pepper was binding the receptors in your eye. What? I'm like, well, the milk, it neutralized the pain. It took away the pain. That is exactly what meditation does for me. If I had a terrible night's sleep, I'm having a stressful day, I know that I've got in my back pocket that 20-minute downtime. I get to turn my brain off for 20 minutes, and it is a deep rest. In fact, scientists look at it, it looks more like stage 3 sleep, the kind you get early in the morning. So let's look at some of the science behind this and why it's so good for us to rest the brain. First of all, when you're sleep deprived, you're more anxious, angry, and confused. 3 things you don't need more of, but it is reliable. Some people are better than others dealing with sleep deprivation, but many of us will experience these things. And why are we more sleep deprived than ever? Of course, because of screens close to our face late at night. That blue light suppresses melatonin, which is a hormone that helps induce sleep. Look at the underslept brain. It is an anxious brain. The part of the brain that is fired up here is the amygdala. These individuals are being shown emotional pictures, and those that are underslept, getting less than 6 hours a night, their brain is reacting more than someone who is well rested. When you meditate, you close your eyes. Of course, your mind wanders. Many of you in the chat were reporting that you're thinking about all kinds of things. Then you become aware that you're wandering, and you say the word to yourself, and the mind calms down. And then, of course, it happens all over again. But if you do it every day, I'm encouraging once a day, start with 5 minutes. Let's see if you can build up to 20. You may start to notice you're going into that calmer place more quickly. Meditation was described to me as accessing the deep part of the mind. It's kind of like the ocean, right? They said the top layer of the ocean, very active, but there's this deeper, calmer level. And you can get there if you just give yourself the opportunity. Now, when they take a look at individuals who strengthen their frontal lobe through activities like meditation, they find that these individuals score higher on surveys about grittiness. So they're grittier human beings. And when they take gritty people and they put them in a functional MRI machine and ask them to really think about nothing, their frontal lobe is more active than people who don't score high on grittiness. So the point here is that meditation can help us be more resilient and be tougher through tough times. You would imagine if you're strengthening the frontal lobe, you're becoming a better decision maker. Yes, this study was done on a game, the sunk cost bias test, where you have a fake business and the business is losing money. And the question is, who's going to stop wasting money faster? Meditators, the non-meditators. The meditators stop wasting money faster. It's like they've divorced the emotions from the content, the money. Also, we see decreased cortisol levels in people who practice transcendental meditation, up to 30% reduction. And when does cortisol go up? Well, many different times, but especially when you're sleep deprived. So it's a great way to counteract it, and a great tool for young people who, as we know, when they get back to more of a normal life, are going to have to be waking up super early. They can't just roll out of bed and turn on Zoom and then turn the camera off, right? They're going to have to actually show up and put on clothes and shower. They're going to be exhausted for a while. So, talk about practicing some sort of quiet time meditation, perhaps in the afternoon, to rest their brain so they can power up for the evening rush. But there's more ways to manage emotions than just meditation. There's also music. People today are really in the first generation where you can have a device that can curate playlists based on emotions. And I'm going to play some songs now for our panelists. And I'd like you to tell me name of the artist, name of the song. I'll help you if you need some help. But here we go. Who sings this one? And I'll keep my eye on the chat too if people get the answer quickly. Aha, that was quick. Adele, name of the song. Panelists?
Never mind, I'll find someone like you.
Someone like you, Lindsay, right? Adele was interviewed on television a year after she wrote this song. And they asked her, are you still upset over the breakup you wrote about here? And she goes, no, I'm over him. I'm like, what? I'm not over him. How does she get over it? Lindsay, do you know how she got over him?
No, she made a lot of money with the
She
music.
made billions off him. That's one way she got over. She also wrote about him, right? And what a great therapy it is, especially for adolescents. Writing therapy is nobody between you and the page. Just write it down. It's powerful. I've experienced it myself after the loss of my dad. So here's a newer song around the same emotion. Let's see if you guys know this. You should know it. It's so good. Stumped you? Olivia Rodrigo. It's called Driver's License. Do yourself a favor and listen to the song. Like the first minute, I was like, yeah, it's a catchy tune. 30 seconds later, like it just, the imagery, it brings you back to a place when you were 17, went through a breakup, you're driving alone in your car, and it's like, wow, just the vivid nature of the lyrics brings you back, and it helps you have that compassion for teenagers who may be going through their first breakup and what that feels like. How about this next song? Not a sad song. Happy by good work, chat, for real. I had a kid one time who was like, I know this. Happy by Will Ferrell. I'm like, yeah, 50% off for that one, buddy. By the way, if you don't like happy music, it still lifts your spirits. It's powerful. That's how powerful it is, a subconscious effect on your brain. Sad music also lifts your spirits because after that, you're like, wow, at least I'm not him. I feel better already. You know what? There is a special category of music, though, that delivers a really unique emotion. Here's one of the songs in it. Who sings this? Not Ozzy. Good guess, though. Really? This is like, yeah, AC/DC. Thank you, Darylyn. Thunderstruck. Lindsay, what do you feel when this song comes on?
I feel energized. Like
Energized, right? You're fired up. You could be coming out for a chess match and like, yeah, I'm gonna take your knight. Like you just, for no reason, you're like ready to go. So, you know, you have a big test coming up. You got a big day coming up. You're not into it. Big game. This song in the car on the way there focuses the mind. If you have a long day of work, you come home, you lower the lights, put on a soothing song. That also focuses the mind into being calm. These are tricks, and you think, oh, they're not going to work. It works. It absolutely works. But you know what? There's a special category of music that researchers call music that gives us the chills. The song that gives me the chills is from a famous musical. Anybody know this one? Not common. By the Roots. What's the musical, though? It's one of the most famous musicals of all time. Nothing? Hamilton. And the song is called My Shot. And for me, when he says the lyrics, basically he was growing up, they told him, you're not getting into Harvard or Carnegie Mellon. You're going to end up in jail or shot. I didn't grow up like that. But I think to myself, if I did, I can't imagine the obstacles you have to overcome. And then to become so hugely famous. I mean, the Roots are the host band, the regular band on the Tonight Show, but then they write this song for Hamilton. It's like, that just gives me the chills, the rising up from the bottom like that. So panelists, I'm sure you all have a song that gives you the chills. Who wants to share? Maybe someone in the chat too has one they'd like to share with us and why. I don't know, they're amazing. Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads. Oh, such a good one. Yeah. Yeah, let me see if I can. That's the beauty of these things. Look at that, within seconds. This is a great song for the pandemic too, right? This isn't my beautiful house. This isn't my life. What happened to me? Like I really felt like that. And we laugh about it now, but man, it was some tough times. The Fight Song, 1,000 Years, all good stuff. You know, science has shown us that music like that lights up the entire brain. And you want to look for something that distracts you from whatever situation you're in. You put on one of those songs that gives you the chills. You're going to be transported to a different place and time. And the last song I want to play for the panelists here, and for everybody on the call, is my favorite hip hop song of all time, written by a famous white rapper, which narrows it to 3. Who sings this one? Eminem, Lose Yourself. Now, what emotion does Eminem express in this song and every song he ever writes? Lindsay, I think you said it. Did you say anger? He's so
Anger.
mad. Yeah. This song was written in 1998. Okay. High school students today were not alive in 1998. Yet, if I walk into any high school, and I've done this hundreds of times, and I put this song on and I say, who here knows these lyrics by heart? You get at least 1, maybe 10 kids, and they're often males, raise their hand. And then I say, you want to see him rap this song a little bit? And the school goes wild, right? And sometimes you get a kid that comes up, puts his hood on, grabs the mic and destroys it like he's Napoleon Dynamite. The whole school can't believe it. And then afterwards, everyone thinks calm down. I ask him an important question. I say, you seem to really relate to Eminem there. I mean, why is that? And you hear stories about anger, being bullied, being repressed, being upset by things. And when they put on Eminem, it's like, man, I relate. I totally understand his pain. I get it. And what an effective way to deal with anger. Rather than to act out, hurt someone else or yourself, you express it through either listening to music, writing music, performing music. We can't stress this enough to young people, because every week in this country, we have an example of somebody who doesn't know how to manage their own anger, and they decide to go off and harm people, and they think it's going to change something. It doesn't. It changes nothing. We've got to figure out a way to express these emotions more productively, so we're not constantly reading these horrible stories. They're often young men, and they're often, in their early 20s, and perhaps we could have helped more when they were younger express themselves. And I think music can serve that purpose. It doesn't have to be mindless. You just listen all the time because it's there. It can be curated, and it's powerful. So let's keep moving on here. I know we're getting a little tight on time, but I want to focus on the chemicals that young people turn to cope. Nicotine, obviously increasing in popularity since vape pens came out. The thing that many young people don't understand is that when you dose yourself with nicotine, you're going to feel relaxed. That's why they're doing it. They want to feel relaxed. But then about a half an hour later, the stress seems to build, and your brain misattributes it and says, I'm having a tough day. I could probably use another hit on the vape pen. No, what's actually happening is you're withdrawing from nicotine. And as it's leaving your bloodstream, agitation follows, heart rate goes up, blood pressure. So your brain seeks out more nicotine. You don't get high off nicotine, but you do get an increase of serotonin. Serotonin's a mood neurotransmitter, and sure, it feels good. So when you stop giving your brain serotonin, ultimately, it's going to say, where was that? That felt good. And the addiction sort of sets in. I have love for anybody who's vaping. I want them to find a healthier way to cope with their emotions and find a healthier way to deal with stress. But we know that if you're using every day, you're much more likely to have a clinical diagnosis of depression. So please, if you have a son or daughter doing this, they're really crying out for some kind of help. There's a reason why they're using every day. There's something driving that behavior. They need to talk to counselors, talk to adults who will help. Alcohol, really in the eyes of adolescents, has kind of been transformed since I was in high school. I mean, now so many teens can talk about how destructive it is, and that's a great thing. But the reason it's so destructive, of course, is it suppresses blood flow in the frontal lobe of the brain. What age does the frontal lobe fully develop? Our brilliant panelists? Yes, Allison said 25. For men, my wife says it might be 45, but she thinks I'm 47, so she's bumped up to 50 now. But it's 22 for females, 25 for males. So think about that. The average ninth grader, 10 years away from that frontal lobe being fully developed, they throw alcohol on top of it. What a mess. Horrible decisions. And it's very tricky to go down this path with people, because there's so many societal problems where you see this intersection between alcohol and other drugs and a horrible decision. And I would never want to blame a victim, somebody who's been assaulted, right? When they're drunk or high. But we can't ignore the fact that in this dangerous world that we live in, if you're going out there and you don't have your faculties, you're inebriated, people could take advantage of you. And it's not right, it's terrible, but it certainly renders you somewhat, helpless in these situations. For teenagers, the earlier they start, the greater the risk of having problems. And when I say problems, I mean dependence. Parents, focus on that word, underline it, dependence. Dependent. Do you want to be dependent on something? I mean, the goal of adolescence is to be independent, yet here's a drug that will render you dependent, almost a 50% chance if you start getting drunk like 2 or 3 times around age 14 and continue that behavior going forward. So I ask teenagers, look, you owe it to your brain just to wait. Wait. If you wait, you see a reduction in your risk of developing problems, goes down to about 10%. Who's still at risk in their 20s? Well, people who have a genetic predisposition for addiction in their life. Finally, the last chemical to mention here is THC. And I say THC and not weed because it can be obtained through so many different products. We know that for teenagers, what's affected is memory. Right? I was an expert in memory, did my dissertation studying it. I can tell you that THC will significantly reduce the volume of the hippocampus, the most important brain structure you have, while you're actively using. Use 3-4 times a week, you're going to start to see it happen. Now, if you have a kid with a photographic memory, maybe they're like, so what? He's still getting good grades. And that's the tough part, right? Because you always have that one kid. But then you've got people with average memories, like me. I needed lots of repetition to retain. If I was using THC regularly, I probably don't get all the degrees I have. My brother had a learning disability. He started using weed a lot when he was in college. He failed out of college. And so you see that story repeat itself. It doesn't affect everybody the same because we're not all the same people, but it certainly can have negative impacts. Yes, we know we can lose up to 8 IQ points. That's been put out there in the media before. But what this study also showed was that if you waited until you're in your 20s before you started, you didn't lose the IQ points. It was only when you started in your early teens and continued into your 20s and 30s that you lose those IQ points. There's a critical window for IQ development, and it really happens in those early to mid teen years. We also see lots of mental health problems, and it kills me when all I hear about in the media is, we're going to make all this money off of legalizing, and nobody wants to really talk about the fact that in the states that have legalized, you have young people who have access to higher potency weed, maybe more so than they even did before, which is hard to imagine. But in the UK, the study showed that if you have THC above 10% in potency, we see a huge increase in emergency room visits for psychosis. And what in the world is that? It's seeing things and hearing things that might not be there. It's delusions, hallucinations. When I had COVID, I had a 10-second hallucination. I saw a ball rolling on the ceiling of my room here, and it freaked me out. For days, I was telling everybody, imagine having something like that for 2 to 3 days. You may find yourself in the ER too, if that was occurring. And we certainly don't see every teenager who uses THC like that. No, but there are certain people at risk for psychosis. Is it medicine? Yeah. And if you're talking to a teenager about this, we have good research that cannabinoids and CBD can help chemo patients and MS patients and chronic pain patients. I think it's wonderful. Whatever they need to feel better, I give it to them. But for the average teenager, who uses regularly, you're much more likely to see them with major depressive disorder, think about an attempt suicide. So I say, take all this information, as disappointing as it might be, and pursue these natural highs. There is the next big coping skill, and it takes a while to hone them perhaps, but finding the activities that change your brain chemistry in a reliable way. Here's some that do it for me: surfing, biking, eating food from my garden, telling a joke, getting a laugh. All these are wonderful. Raising money and going for hikes and playing sports and hanging out with friends. I'm telling you, there are so many things you can try, but I encourage young people to be like little researchers on themselves and see what does it for you. In college, I started a student group that promotes natural highs. And the group became so successful, the university gave us a house. They took over a fraternity house. How privileged am I, right? And they moved us in. It was kind of like the movie Revenge of the Nerds. If you ever saw that? All of a sudden, I'm a senior, and we have this house, and it's incredible, right? So in that house, every semester, we had a dance party. Back when teenagers used to dance. They're not dancing anymore, right? I don't think so. But back in the day, there's always a dance every semester. And we played the same song at the end of every dance. It was an old song by REM called "It's the End of the World as We Know It." This one. And even if the dance was terrible, we would jump up and down during this song and scream the lyrics at the top of our lungs. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. And when the song was over, we collapsed on the ground, sweating and laughing. It was amazing. Fast forward 2 years, or 2 years ago, it's 2 years ago, I was at an outdoor concert with my kids. Nobody's dancing. It's hot. It's July. Last song of the night comes on, REM, End of the World as we know it. I start doing this. And my wife was like, what the hell are you doing? We live here. And I was like, I got to represent. I'm going for it, right? And I kept jumping. Do you know how uncomfortable it is to jump alone in front of people? Yes, you do. You're watching me do it right now, okay? So I kept jumping, and then children from the crowd see what I'm doing. They come up and start jumping with me. And they asked me to pick them up. They're like, uppy, uppy. So I did. I'm like, oh, pick them up. And the parents are like, why are you touching my kids? I'm like, because they asked me. I don't know. When the song ended, I was sweating. My heart was pounding on my chest. And parents are coming up to me saying things like, you're an inspiration. That was amazing. Like I jumped for 4 minutes. Are you serious? And I felt good for days. I'm not just talking a few hours. I felt so good that I took that risk. My mood was through the roof. 4 minutes. 4 minutes. It's like jumping into a cold body of water. It will change how you feel regardless of your opinion of it. That is a natural high. And I try to express this to teenagers all the time. You don't need the chemicals to do it if you've got activities that reliably deliver it to you. I wrote a book on a topic called A Better High. Each chapter is about this comparison between the chemical high and a natural high. But look at laughing, the laughing brain. Look how it lights up. Panelists, what drug makes the brain look like this? We haven't mentioned this drug tonight. Anyone? Guesses? No guesses. Interesting. So cocaine is a drug that lights up the brain like this. But I guarantee you, laughing is not a more intense high than cocaine, but it's a better high because there's no way you'd roll over tomorrow in your bed after watching like a great comedian and be like, oh, he's so funny, I'm hungover, right? That's not going to happen. And the question is, why not? You could like win a big game and have this amazing moment, wake up feeling great the next day. The brain has had to balance natural highs. It's all about homeostasis. Chemical highs don't behave that way. Chemicals force you into a high state. And of course, afterwards, you're going to be in this low state. There's a great book called Never Enough by psychologist Judith Grisel. She wrote about her own use of THC. And she got to a point where she felt like she couldn't enjoy everyday life until she was high in the drugs. She says, I have to stop this. I want to enjoy my everyday life. That's why natural highs are so great, because you can experience them and still drive a car, right? And live your life. Look at yoga. Yoga is a natural high. They compared it to cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, and Kundalini yoga was almost as good. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty sweet. And it's a lot cheaper to do yoga, I'm sure. Music, we talked about this earlier. Look at the brain light up. You see on the bottom, that's the LP there, is music that gives a little pleasure. Then we have high pleasure, and then we have the music chills. The brain just on fire. It feels so good. Experience that kind of music. Exercise and memory. You want something that improves your memory? Of course you do. It's exercise. You don't have to be a great athlete. You don't have to be running marathons. You need to move your body. If you're sitting for an hour, try this. Get up twice an hour for 90 seconds. Stand, walk the room a bit. And we have seen changes in blood glucose levels and cholesterol levels. And mood goes up. Just moving more is beneficial to your brain, especially the hippocampus gets larger in volume. Stress scores go down, happiness scores go up. Humans are meant to be outside and meant to move. There are negative ions outside, especially at the beach and at the mountains, and negative ions, when we breathe them in, they calm us down and they're very relaxing. I know in Westchester, you have big trees like we have here in Princeton, New Jersey, right? Those big, tall trees that make you just feel like, oh, this is so peaceful to be around these. Look at the brain chemical released when you run. It's called the anandamide on the left. And compare that to THC on the right. They look almost identical. And what fascinates me is if you run 3-4 times a week, your mood and memory get better. Take THC that much, mood and memory get worse. I said that to a high school kid and he goes, sweet, I'll do both then. I'll run, I'll smoke, it'll cancel. I'm like, can't convince everybody, okay? But we know running is the better high. Nature, great high, look, it calms the brain, reduces blood flow in parts of the brain associated with stress. Why is this? If you really break it down, it's water sounds, bird sounds, wind sounds, all these things are wonderful. Not leaf blowers, like they come through my neighborhood 3 times a week and just irritate you. Nature reduces cortisol levels. You go for a hike for an hour or more, it's like meditating. So do you need to meditate, Matt? No, not if you go for a hike. I mean, look at it that way, right? These are replacement kind of activities that will have similar effects on your cardiovascular system. So my recommendations, I move for my mood, my cardio health. In the morning is when I do it if I can. Walking, biking, running, gardening, swimming, whatever does it for you. Afternoon is when I meditate to try to be more resilient. Take a nap if you will. Hard to take a nap though, right? Especially if you're at work. One time I walked into an auditorium to set up and a guy was lying on the ground. I thought he was dead. Turned out he was napping for 10 minutes. He set an alarm like, dude, just try meditation. At least you can sit up. Nobody thinks you've been deceased. Doing something mindless is great too. Some artwork or reading a book. In the evening, that's when I love to cook, eat, be social, tell jokes, goof around, do karaoke, whatever it is to just transport me to another place, especially with my kids. They're a lot of fun to laugh with. They're still at that age where they don't think I'm total cornball, right? I can get them laughing. On the right is Sydney. On the left is my son. Now, when he was born, my wife gave me the ultimate natural high. She said, I want to name our son after your grandfather who died of cancer. She didn't even know my grandfather. So I'm like, whoa, I can't believe this. We're gonna name our son after my grandfather. So we called him Grandpa, which is unique, right? No kidding. His real name is Roy. He did not come out looking this cute. He had about 3 months of this. And when he was born, the doctor said, he looks just like you, Matt. I'm like, no, he looks like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And my son heard that. And he goes, yeah, Dad, this is what you look like. You're Nicolas Cage with a testicle on your chin. I don't know what that is, but he loves me. He loves me. And that's the point of the story. Never ask a child to draw you. I think that's my message tonight. I'm going to leave you with a few parting pictures that you'll appreciate. One, you've heard a lot of my storms tonight, and hopefully you've seen some of the beautiful waves. This presentation is the beautiful wave. This is the best thing I'm going to feel all day. This is one of my natural highs to present, even if it's to a computer, where sometimes I feel like Rupert Pupkin from King of Comedy, just performing jokes to nobody. But our panelists have helped me get through it. It's just to see, Allison smile, Lindsay smile, just like changes everything. Robert, you look like you're in a hostage video. You're all blacked out. I can't even tell Robert's still there, but I think he is. I think he's still there. But I want to end with this, guys. Before we get to the questions, somebody actually took footage of that night at that outdoor concert, right? So the next time you're in that moment where like you can feel yourself wanting to take a positive risk, do it. It will change how you feel for the better. The funniest thing about this is at the end, the guy goes, give it up for the guy with 12 kids. Oh man, and that's, I'll stop there. I'm over 10 minutes already with the presentation. I want to take your questions. I want to thank, first of all, the panelists who are fantastic. I'm also offering the panelists a free copy of my book, and I'll gladly sign it for you. So hopefully we can get names and emails after the call. So please hang on after we're done. But now time for, and thank you, adorable kids. I love that comment. I do appreciate that. Beautiful children, yeah.
Well, thank you, Matt, so much for not only sharing your insight and expertise, but your sense of humor, because I laughed quite a bit. I know I wasn't on screen, but it was probably for the best. So before we dive into the Q&A, we would appreciate, hold on, let me just share my screen here really quick. Okay, we would appreciate everybody's feedback on tonight's presentation. If you simply open your camera and point it at the QR code you see on your screen, a link should pop up on your phone and you can access the survey that way. We will put the slide back up at the end of the night, and if you prefer to fill it out at that time, please do. And it will also be included in the email that you will all receive tomorrow. It's very short, I promise, 5 questions, but it provides us with a lot of valuable feedback that we use to inform our programming going forward. So we appreciate your participation in advance. We would also like to invite you all to the June webinar, Parenting for the Summer Before College and Beyond. It promises to be a very informative webinar, so we encourage you to register. Another QR code here for you. And at this time, we'll begin our Q&A. Joining us will be Allison McGinn from Student Assistance Services, Allison is a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience working with adolescents and parents. She is currently the student assistance counselor at Yonkers High School and Gordon High School. So welcome, Allison. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Linda, who will be moderating the Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So if you want to just put your questions into the chat box or to the Q&A, Lisa, which one are we preferring here?
Either one is fine.
Okay. So Lisa will be moderating that, but I'm going to start out with just a few questions. When you registered, we gave you the opportunity to ask some questions in advance. So we'll start out with those. And these will, Matt or Allison, whoever wants to start off, the other can then comment, please. So the first one has to do with homework, and it's a two-part question. So the first was, how do we best address the high volume of homework causing stress in our high school children? And how can we convince schools to reduce it, especially when the research shows that homework doesn't really need to be excessive to have results?
Allison, you work in a school, so I think I'm going to hand it off to you for the first one. What do you think?
So I think that, you know, a lot of the things I'm going to suggest are things that Matt kind of touched on, but in terms of, I think most high schools these days have way more homework than at least when I was in high school. You know, I think starting with the basics, still making sure that your kids are maintaining good self-care, getting enough sleep every night. For a teenager, that means, you know, 9 to 10 hours of sleep, which is a lot. And I think especially with a big homework load, that's, you know, not always possible. But, you know, with sleep, eating properly, hydrating properly, the basic things does put them in a position where they can manage a little bit more. Unfortunately, you know, in terms of changing the culture of how much homework is being given, you know, I would say starting with speaking to administrators in your child's school might be a good place. But even, you know, getting involved in the PTA or PTSA, depending on your school, you know, they are wonderful advocates. You know, I think they are, being parents too, would be very interested, if they aren't already aware of that research, to, you know, share that research with them, encourage them to possibly get behind this as something that they want to advocate for in their schools. I have found in my schools, you know, and the schools that my children go to, that the PTA does have a lot of power.
I agree with that too. In Princeton, where I live, I've been on numerous board meetings, and they have a student liaison there who focuses heavily on mental health. And he encourages the students to show up to those meetings, especially during the comments section. And a lot of times they focus on this very issue. And I think it makes the board and also the superintendent and principals more sensitive to it when they're really hearing those student voices. So encourage students to be empowered and speak out whenever they can, but especially those meetings where the adults are there, the people who make decisions are there. And you just might find that there's some progress on this issue. But I like everything Allison had to say.
Thank you both. Let me move to the next question, which I think I'll start with Matt. And you may have touched on this in the presentation, but one of the questions was, what are some other good de-stress methods to use with kids who don't like meditation or yoga?
Sure, yeah. So, you know, the natural highs list is really an offer to start experimenting on yourself to see, you know, what does it for you. Obviously, some kids love to run. You know, other kids are into competitive sports. Some are into music. But I think it can take a lifetime for some people, let's be honest, to really explore and find out what does it for them. If you just have one or two things you can do reliably every day, simple things that are going to change how you feel. You know, obviously we all love the big vacation you take once a year, you know, to the beach in August. When we're talking about daily things we can do to boost our mood. And so for me, you know, the ability to walk outside to my garden for a few minutes and tinker around, like, it just makes me feel very peaceful. For my son, reading a book before he goes to bed seems to do it for him. but it's trial and error. It's trial and error. And as kids age and they go through teenage years, it's going to be different things. So never stop sort of experimenting. As far as proven techniques, obviously there are things we can try based on different situations. If your kid is looking to chill out or relax, there's other things I can mention other than yoga and meditation. But it really is. It depends on the person and what they're looking for.
Okay. So the next question has to do with self-esteem, and the person wrote in, how can I help my son with his self-esteem? So do either Allison or Matt want to start with that one?
What do you think, Allison? I'll chime in.
I would start off by, and this doesn't pertain to every kid, but I would start off by encouraging them to decrease their social media usage. There is a lot of research out there that is showing more and more how detrimental it can be to us in many ways, but especially self-esteem. That goes for adults as well. But it's natural for, I think, adolescents even more so, to be constantly comparing themselves. And that really is at the root of everything on social media, unfortunately. There's also good stuff out there too, but that's why I say, limiting it and maybe having a conversation with them around, what types of things they will be looking at on social media, and trying to keep it more positive and, not a huge focus of their lives. But I mean, even on social media, there's stuff about, stress management and things like that. So, I mean, you can also encourage them to maybe, follow more people who are putting out positive content that might help support their mental health if they'd still like to stay connected on social media. I think, Matt, anything to add?
The only thing I was going to add to the social media piece, and I've talked to lots of teenagers about this, some who quit cold turkey and love it, others who set limits for themselves. I think the one big piece I try to get across is when it's late at night and you're tired and you're at your most vulnerable, that's the last time you want to be, doom scrolling, as they say. But of course, that's the time when so many young people will be on it because they have this little free time. But yet that's the moment when you're maybe most at risk for having a really extreme reaction. If you see something that's upsetting, and maybe there's someone that you really like, you thought they liked you, and now you're getting evidence of they like someone else. And now it's 12:30 at night. There's nobody really to talk to. You're tired. You're really emotional. All these things are just come together in a terrible way. So steel yourself against what could be. Let's respect that social media, could be really harmful to us. So let's wait, for the waking hours perhaps to look at it and limit the amount of use. And I agree with what Allison's saying. The concept of self-esteem has really evolved too. Like for years, it was always like, we have to boost self-esteem. These kids are self-esteem is too low. And it turns out you can get kids whose self-esteem is a bit too high and they become very destructive, right? Harmful in the things they're saying and doing. So to me, what's really important is to empower kids, to get involved in activities that make them feel like they've accomplished things. I like social media sometimes. At the end of the day, what have I accomplished with a tweet and someone liked it? Like, I'd much rather see that I physically did something productive in my house or finished a project, wrote a book, that kind of thing. So I would kind of encourage kids to move in that direction where they have sort of tangible products that they can point to.
Or even volunteer work has been shown to have a huge positive impact on self-esteem for kids. If your kids are younger, you can get involved in volunteer things with them. If they're teenagers, they can get out there and do it on their own. Sometimes even a part-time job, it being able to encourage and instill independence can be another thing that will boost their self-esteem. If their job also happens to be something that is helpful in some way to another person or the community or something, you can that would be even better. But it's something I think not only boosts their self-esteem, but I mean, the benefits to volunteering are really endless. So,
it's so
I think it's a win-win.
It gets you out of your own head, right? You have that kid who's like in that social media world, obsessing over something. The second you reach out and help someone else, boy, it seems like it's a perspective shift that is a refreshing, change.
I think you guys gave some really great answers to that question. Lots of good ideas. So one question that's come in during the chat, the person, first of all, thanked you for your presentation and said, mentioned that you spoke about how important it is for everyone to have support. And this parent is asking, how do you get your teenager to feel that as their parent, you're part of their support and not their enemy?
Obviously, parents have this duality, right? Where they've got to be the disciplinarian and they also are there to love and care. And I think playing that part well is important. Just knowing that there's going to be moments that are going to be ugly and you have to set a boundary. And it's great if you can talk about consequences ahead of time so that when your son or daughter, breaks the rule, you don't seem like such a bad guy, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I think the important thing is when emotions calm down, to step in and be that empathic parent and let them know you love them and you're there for them. Because that's really the support that endures. Eventually the emotions will kind of calm down and they'll get over the thing that, they're upset about, but they'll remember that, you're really doing it out of love. And so it's a timing thing. You just got to wait for that to kind of pass. Allison, anything to?
Kind of along the same lines. I mean, making sure to try and, when they're in that moment of high emotion, trying to validate more than, do the pointing out, what might have been wrong with the situation or what they could do better next time, validating that, you're understanding how they're feeling. And even if you feel like you don't understand, maybe asking more questions that are along the lines of, understanding where they're at and why they're feeling the way they're feeling, or what exactly the thoughts they're having around this situation are.
Well, you raised a good point too, Allison, because the teenage brain is a tale of two brains. It's the hot brain and the cold brain. And when they're hot, that's not the time to be reasoning and, like raising your voice. When they're cold, especially, age 16, they can think on the same level as an adult. But it's picking those times and knowing when they're hot versus knowing when they're cold. It will make you a more effective communicator with a teen. And when they're the cold brain, that's when you come in with the empathy and compassion for them. They know you love them. And when they're hot, give them some space. 5-minute rule was always good on the psychiatric hospital when I had a teenager who was just boiling over. It's like, all right, you need a 5-minute break.
Okay, this next question talks about therapy. And the question is, how do you know if your child needs to see a therapist? And what's the best way to introduce a teenager to therapy? Do either one of you have any comments about that?
Sure, several. I mean, I think having done therapy, and I actually do coaching now with teens.
Okay.
In where I live in Princeton, and so these are kids that tend to be therapy averse. Let's say that. And I pitched the idea of like, this is not a involved clinical case. Your son or daughter might like a coaching relationship where once a month we kind of talk how things are going and see where they're at. And if they need more, maybe we can get them into a weekly therapy. But ultimately, therapy is something that it's wonderful if you have a kid that's got some insight and they enjoy talking through different issues. If you have someone who's completely averse to it and just like angry and not interested, well, you don't have a patient, as we say in psychology. So don't force the kid to do it ultimately. I think therapy is needed when you notice a behavior really interfering with their functioning. Mm-hmm. So anxiety is a good example. You have a kid who has some aversion to school and now, they're complaining about stomach problems every day and they don't want to go to school and they're missing, 20, 25 days of school a year. And you're thinking, okay, this is interfering with their functioning. We need to move on this. How can we be a team here and see if we can get some help? That's usually the rule of thumb. But there are oftentimes kids who are just struggling. They're functioning fine. They're functioning really well. Sometimes they're the high performers, but yet they're under incredible stress and it's, bubbling over a lot. And if they're willing to go to therapy, well, great, and bring them in too. I think it's only beneficial for them.
You have anything to add, Allison?
I just, a lot of what Matt said were exactly kind of my thoughts about it. I think also kind of letting them know that it doesn't have to be a huge commitment. It can be something that they try out. And if it's really not working for them, they're not held to it. Kind of giving them an idea that, like Matt said, even if they do start therapy, most therapists are going to be open to focusing on what they'd like to focus on to, initially start. And if there's things that they don't want to talk about, they're not going to be forced to. And that they do, I think teens don't realize how much control they have over what's going to happen in the therapeutic relationship. And I think trying to educate them on that can be helpful too.
Okay. I think we might be getting towards the end, but here's another question about stress, and it's about how to incorporate stress relief into the child's daily routine without kids thinking you're forcing them, or if the kids just won't listen to your suggestions. Do you have any idea, suggestions for that?
My biggest thing is be the role model, parents, right? My kids would never have meditated ever in their life if they hadn't seen me go into our study, especially on the weekends, by the fireplace and just do it. And then they're like, and they gravitate towards it. You be that role model. You be that parent who's out there going for a run in the morning or getting on a bike, participating in some, adult softball league, and the kids are there and they're seeing you being active. They're going to want to join in. They're going to see the positive effects. They hear you talking about how great it is. That's better than anything else you could read to them or say to them is your actions.
I think we may, let's see, I think we're just about finished and we've pretty much covered all of the questions. So I think Lisa, if you have anything to say to finish us off.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I would encourage everybody out there to check in with your local coalitions. A lot of us are co-sponsors of this speaker series and have resources that we can share with you as parents and caregivers in terms of dealing with what is sometimes a very challenging situation. So I would encourage you to do that. And let me just share my screen one more time. I did promise that we would put this slide back up again. If you would kindly share your feedback with us through the survey, it would be very much appreciated. Thank you again, Matt, for an amazing presentation, and Allison for joining us and fielding some questions. Your insight and expertise were very valuable, and we will be sharing that with all of you through the tip jar, which you will be receiving by email tomorrow. Thank you to all of you guys out there for joining us. We hope we'll see you in June. Have a great night and be well.
I think we have to end on a song at least, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like the scene in Goodfellas where he's like summarizing everything. I feel like it was a good show. I went up to Westchester and there were good fellas and girls on the call, and it was Linda who didn't think she was going to be a panelist, but was a great panelist. And we had some laughs. We had Allison, who was jumping in, an expert the whole time. She had done the presentation. She knows so much. And I love the smiles. You guys are fantastic. You're good fellas. And if you ever want to contact me, it's mattbellace.com, Twitter, Facebook, which I do only sparingly, but I still do them. You can see me at Matt Bellace. And thank you so much, panelists, who I'll be finding you and getting you a copy of my first book, A Better High. And my second book, Life is Disappointing and Other Inspiring Thoughts, which is the title of the book, is due out probably in August. So thank you so much.
Thanks again, Matt. Good evening, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening. Thank you, Matt.